Well, most of you are probably aware of this little giant 50-pound power hammer that I have. I've used it quite a bit, but you know, there's a little bit of local history behind this hammer. Well, this is the building that 40 years ago is where that little giant 50-pound hammer came from. This is just 8 miles from my shop down the road in Joliet in the little town of Silesia. He used to operate in the back of this shop and was a local blacksmith for this area. Well, this is that very same little giant trip hammer. Now, I couldn't have remembered the man's name, but I looked it up on the all-knowing internet, and it seems like his name was Ben Schmidt. I bought it from his widow after he had died, and I don't know what that date was. It was in the early 80s that I picked this up and brought it to the shop. And this leg vise also came from that shop of Ben Schmidt's. So when I found myself looking back in retrospect, 30 years prior to this borax project, these tools from Ben Schmidt's shop moved just 8 miles down the road and were instrumental in building those wagons. So in a fashion, his memory lives on through his tools. So I knew building these borax wagons was going to take a lot of blacksmithing, and this was the hammer that I had at the time, and I was a little concerned whether it was going to be big enough to do the job. But one of the first things I really put this to the test was building an all-steel standard. Totally different style, but it served the same function on these big wagons.
The standards on a wagon are the uprights on the bolsters to keep the body from sliding side to side. The video that we're going to do here today is showing how these are drawn out to the proper sizes. We're starting with 3-inch wide, 1-inch thick piece of steel. We draw them down to the top 6 inches or so to 2 inches in width. Now we're going to draw these from 1 inch thick down to 3/4 inch thick. This is by using a little giant 50-pound trip hammer, and we're just going to show you how we went through this. Now that we have the ends tapered down to 3/4 of an inch, the ends are still square, so we'll take the time to round them over, and then we'll start to curl the ends and do the finishing touches. You can see that we made 2 standards with each piece of iron. This gave us enough to grab a hold of the irons with the tongs when they were in the forge. So here we put them in a metal bandsaw. We're cutting them in half, and we will weld them to the base, which is then embedded into the bolsters and into the axle cap, where they will actually serve their function. So we'll see here a finished picture of what they're like when they're completed.
So 10 years ago at this time, I have the basic foundation of the front axles done. Remember, I'm doing two at once. But there's still a lot of ironwork to do, and a lot of it has to be done on this little giant 50, but I'm getting to feel that it is going to be sufficient for the job. So this is the next step in completing that front axle. And when this is all done, we actually get a visit from Bobby, Claudia, and their son Bo.
Now, to continue the building of the front axle, we actually have to digress just a little bit. I'm going to disassemble our axle by taking the axle hounds back out. These were all previously fitted to make sure they were in their correct position. But now we're going to put them together, and this will be a permanent assembly. We're going to take the axle cap off the axle, and what we need to do is actually bed this axle cap permanently onto the axle. So what I'm doing is applying some Titebond 3. It's a permanent wood glue. It's a waterproof glue. Doesn't necessarily bond well with the steel. It does well with the wood. But what it does is it gives it 100% contact, the axle cap with the axle itself. So we use the kingpin to make sure we are lined up in the proper position. We're going to put the bottom plate of the fifth wheel on, and then take pipe clamps and actually start to apply pressure of the axle cap down to the axle. We want enough glue on there that we actually start to squeeze the glue out. We're going to put clips on, and this is the diagram. We have two different sizes. One is 8-inch and one is 10-inch. So I'm going to put these through a shear and take off the excess corners. It just saves a little time in grinding and sanding. This is a hand-operated shear. It's just like a great big scissor. Works well on steel up to about 3/8 of an inch thick. This just has a long lever on it and just big pair of scissors. Once we get the corners off, we're going to take it to the sander where we have a zirconium belt, and we're going to round off the corners. And when these are all rounded off, we'll take a 7/8 round rod that we have threaded, and we'll weld these onto the ends of these plates and then bend them around to where they fit the contour of the axle. Now, underneath the axle clip and underneath the axle, there's a steel bar that the clip goes through, and these are 3/4 inch thick, 2 inch wide, and we have the corners beveled off, and we'll drill a hole in them. So we're going to put the first two clips on. I'll get the right one in the right position here. One goes on either side of the fifth wheel. Now we'll take our clip bar and put it on underneath, put our nuts on, and to begin to cinch it down even tighter than the pipe clamps will. And we'll notice when we start to increase the pressure, tighten up the axle cap to the axle, that more glue will start to kind of squeeze out, and we'll take and just wipe that off and go ahead and allow that to dry and set up. What we're going to do is get our axle hounds ready, and since the next set of clips goes through the axle hounds, we're going to pre-drill the holes that the 7/8 rod will go through. These axle hounds are 4 inches thick, so we'll again go from both sides, meet in the middle, and you can see here they're ready to go. So we'll start to assemble the first one, and just like we did in the first video of the beginning to assemble the axles, we'll put our pipe clamps on and we'll begin to pull that in position. Now it's already pre-fitted, so we're just going to pull it up to where our holes are in the right position, which we have marked here. And we're going to do this to both sides. Make sure we have our holes in the proper position. Now we can go ahead and begin to put on our second set of axle clips. These have been pre-bent, pre-fitted, so they're going to slide right through the axle hound. Tap it down into position. And these clips are actually what fastens permanently the axle cap to the axle itself. We'll put in our kingpin, make sure it's all lined up, and we'll put the other half of the fifth wheel plate. So underneath these set of axle clips takes a long bar. This creates a bridge work for strength underneath the axle and also acts as the axle clip. So we're going to drill a 7/8 hole for these axle clips. And then because they come under the axle, they have to be bent up to where they fit from underneath the axle up to and fasten to the bottom of the axle hound. So we have to take and put the right bend, and these actually took a little while, but here I have a pattern of light steel that I pre-bent so I knew kind of what my angle needed to be. And here we have the angle and the clip bar part of the bridge that will go underneath the axle. So the forward part of this bridge iron has to come up to the tip of the axle hounds. So I've lined out where the holes need to be, and we're going to pre-drill that with a 1/4 inch drill. That'll help us to line up the holes when we put the bridge work underneath. Now here you can see the bridge irons are shaped and ready to go on. They're going to clip up underneath the axle clip. We're going to put our nuts on. There's one that goes forward, one that goes back. We're putting on the back one here. Clamp it into place, tighten down the nuts. And this is the final assembly of the axle hounds into the axle cap onto the axle. So this is what we look like with our bridge work on. Now the second set of irons is going to be the stabilizer bars. This is what they look like when they're finished, and this is the process we took to do it. We started out putting our flat plates where they needed to be, front and back. The center part of this stabilizer bar is 1¼ inch square stock solid steel. So we're going to take it to the forge and begin to put the 90-degree bend where they're going to come down to the flat irons that we saw just previously. This is, like I said, 1¼ inch solid square stock. And this is a process that involves more than just bending it. Because of the size of the iron, it needs to be upset, which means it needs to be compressed back on itself so that it has a tight and a square full corner. So what I'm doing is moving the iron back into the corner of the steel. We'll put a flatter on it and take out some of our hammer marks that we've been working on it. Take off all the loose scale. You can see the tight square corner that we have here finished. I want to check, make sure that we're square, do some final adjustings. And here we have the ends where they come down to the flat bar on our stabilizers, and we're going to do this on all 4 corners. So we end up having 8 of these, and you can see they're bent here. And this is how the corner looks as it's built into the stabilizer bar, and this is the position that they'll be bolted into. On the top of the 5th wheel plate, we'll take that off, and here the bolster will actually go to that top 5th wheel plate, and we're going to scribe it onto the iron. It has a little bevel that comes down and fits up to the iron, so we're going to bevel that off so we don't have any sharp corners. And then it has to get drilled to accept the bolts that go through the fifth wheel plate up through the bolster, and then there's a top plate that it'll be fastened to also. These are all 1/2-inch bolts. So we're going to drill again, starting from one direction and turn around, go back from the other direction and meet in the middle. So the ends get a bolt. I'm going to drill these by hand. And the top part of this bolster has been routed out to accept the standards, and you saw these in a previous video how we made those. So these are going to fit down to where the top of the standard is flush, one for each side, and this is what will keep the wagon box in place from side to side. And there is a top plate that goes on top that will carry the weight and take the wear of the box itself. So we're going to make sure our bolts fit. We're going to clean up our holes. There's 4 bolts through the center, but the 2 out on the end will be actually riveted into place. The box frame will sit in this position so a nut would be in the way. In the center of this bolster, to help strengthen the hole of the kingpin, each has a pair of iron. Because these accept a carriage bolt, one set of the iron has to have a square hole. So we're going to take a square drift punch and we're going to square up the hole so that the square head underneath the head of the carriage bolt has a place to set into this iron plate. So this is just the process of taking a round hole, making it into a square hole so it can accept the carriage bolt head. And these are the irons as they're finished, and we'll go ahead and put those on, and this will strengthen the kingpin on the front bolster. And this is what it looks like when it's assembled. Next, we're going to put on the rear stabilizer bar. The rear stabilizer bar is what keeps the axle from rotating forward when the weight of the tongue is placed upon it, and it will keep the front axle from pivoting forward. So these have their own special axle clips. They are bolted into place. And this stabilizer is how it looks here. Now next we need a set of clips that goes on the outside of the axle cap, and these have a hook to them. These clips are made out of 3/4 inch thick by 2 inch wide steel, and the ends have to be drawn down to a 7/8 rod. They aren't welded on, but they're actually forged out of this 3/4 by 2 steel. The process here was to draw it down in the trip hammer, bringing it down to eventually we have a 7/8 rod, and this is the process that we took here. This takes multiple heats, going back and forth from the forge to the trip hammer. You can see we're drawing it out into length here, getting it into kind of a rough end round position. This isn't true round. Next we'll put it into a fuller that will actually make it round. This is a top and bottom plate with a 7/8 hole formed through the center of it. It will actually make this to a true round 7/8 rod. This takes a couple times to do it, so I'll actually go back to the forge, reheat up again, and do the final finish 7/8. And here you'll see the 4th of the ends of the 4 clips that we'll need. Well, each of these clips have a hook on them for the stay chains, which is a limiting chain for the purpose of restraining the double tree so it doesn't swing too far. So this we also drew out of a 1-inch square stock. You see the bottom of it is square, and this is kind of a mortise tenon into the flat stock, and we are forge welding it through into this 3/4 by 2 axle clip. This takes several heats again to finish this forge weld. So it's kind of a combination riveting, but in the process of riveting we're also welding it into place. Now once it's welded into place, we'll take the end of that bar and we'll actually form our hook for the stay chain. Get here close, we're going to check our size, see if we are close to it. Go back in, take another heat, do our final adjusting. We're using a little lighter hammer here. We're taking out our hammer marks, taking off the scaling. This is kind of the finished cleanup work of our hook. Once the hooks are done, we went ahead and formed the axle clip so that they will fit the axle. And this is what they ended up looking like finished. Now one of these clips goes on the outer end of each axle cap. This is a real heavy clip and it takes a lot of stress on it. That's why it's 3/4 inch thick, but there's one that goes on each side. In the center where the reach is, there's also a set of irons, has a pull plate, another axle clip, and another plate that strengthens the kingpin. This is put into place, and again the plate put on the bottom and the clip on the top, and you can see here the center iron assembly. And this pull plate is part of how these wagons are pulled when the mules are hitched to them. Now the clip bar to these outside axle clips with the stay chain hooks is also part of the queen bolt brace. The queen bolt is the bolt that goes through the tip of the axle hounds. So these rods will support that queen bolt and also function as the clip bar for these outside axle clips with the hooks. When these are in place, the final iron is a clevis that goes on each side of the axle hounds, which actually will get pulled on by the mules.
So Bobby and his family had other family in Colorado, and they made a point to swing up to see these wagons in the state that they were at that time. He, like you, had just been watching on YouTube and watching the progress. But to see his response when he actually laid eyes on them and put his hands on them, you could just see the anticipation and the reality, this is really going to work. So this now brings us up into the early part of June of 2016. And the next step, of course, is to build the rear axles. And we're going to visit that memory next month. We do appreciate you coming along, and thanks for watching.